Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. Today, I am pleased to have Michael Dolan on, who is the founder of Winding Road Stories. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everybody at home. Thanks for
Thanks.
listening.
Thanks. Well, thanks for coming on. I believe I first interacted or saw your posts on, I would assume, Twitter or X, whatever we want to call it today.
Twix. We'll call it
Twix. There,
Twix.
there we go. The multi-billion-dollar Elon Musk project. So, if only we could start something like that and have someone come in and buy it for 40 something billion dollars
That
and
is truly the American dream, is to sell out
sell out that.
for everything. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
definitely I think that's definitely the writing dream. People always, and I get that question like frequently from people. They're like, when is someone gonna buy the movie rights to The Body Man? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, well, I mean, don't you want that to happen so you can be rich? And I'm just like, ha, you're funny. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. And if you think most authors that get money for their books for movie rights are rich, then I've got some oceanfront property in Kansas. I would love to sell you. So
Well, I think that people, understandably so, that aren't familiar with the business, attach themselves to the largest outcomes, right?
right.
So, you read in the paper someone sold this for several million dollars, and
Hmm.
you, in your mind, that's how it works. And
Right.
they don't really understand things like options, um, projects getting stuck in development, which is
Right.
very, very common. And so you don't really see all of those things. You just see the pot of gold.
Hmm.
And so everyone sort of thinks, well, why don't I get that? And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of other roads and they don't always lead to nirvana, you know?
I think they might be called winding roads, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's
it's part of
they.
it. I mean, the whole purpose of the name of the book company was that well, I had started in the magazine business,
Right.
and
Yeah, I want to talk about
then
that.
yeah, so but after that, when the magazine business looked like it wasn't much longer for this world, I started ghostwriting books for people,
Hmm.
and I was working with this agency that would it's kind of like a matchmaker. They would say, this person is a CEO of this business. You
Yep.
seem to know about this business. He wants to do a book. He can't write a book. You can. You seem like a good pair. And they
Got a
would
good
put us
fit for you.
together, and I'd work on the project for them. And
Okay.
and it was interesting. Like
Hmm.
it was fun to have people trust you with their life stories and things like
Sure.
that. But what would happen is if the client didn't um pay for a certain level of package, once the book was done, that was it. So they'd be like, great, you got your book. Good luck
Okay.
with it. And the client would say, wait a second, I don't know what to do with this. Like I don't have an agent. I don't have a
Gotcha.
publisher. I've got a book. I don't know how to get it out in the world. And they would just be pulling at my pant leg, like, don't leave me. Like, I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
And so my thought was, well, I wonder how many books out there where people just didn't know what to do,
Yeah.
or they got frustrated by the process and they put it in a drawer and said, I can't emotionally, I can't take it anymore.
Right.
And so Winding Road was sort of like every book has that winding road. Every book
Mm.
has that kind of S-shaped path to
Yeah.
get to where it is. And so, we wanted to welcome the people who were in the struggle,
Hmm.
that were trying to figure it out. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is,
The struggle is real. The struggle
it's
is
very real
real.
and it's daily. Yes.
It is daily. Yeah, it's one of those things, and I've talked about in other podcasts, and it's definitely come up with other people. Uh, I think people that don't know anything about the industry or don't know anything about writing assume, not everyone assumes it, but certain people assume that okay, people probably go to school to learn how to craft novels. They
Mhm.
get some kind of a English degree or creative writing degree, and then they come out with a book, and then that's their career. And it's like that is so far from the truth. Now, those things do happen, and people do come out of school, high school or college, write a book, and they're able to pay their bills doing it. But you're talking like the 1% of the 1%. You
even if you are successful, like like just so that people understand the economics of this, right?
Hmm.
Let's say that you come out of school and you get a book deal that's worth $100,000 and you say, wow, this is great,
Hmm.
right? I can do this for a living. Um, well, that deal usually is spread out over multiple payments, right? So you're not just getting a check for $100,000. You might be getting a check for $20,000, or you might
Right.
be getting a check for $15,000. And then there are these milestones that you have to hit to get the rest of the money, which
Hmm.
include selling a certain number of books,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like an NFL contract. You see a guy and he signs for $100 million, and you realize, like, 15 of it is guaranteed. It's
Hmm.
like, well, no, all that money isn't guaranteed. And
Yeah.
it's paid out oftentimes over 2 years, 3 years,
Right.
right? So that $100,000 contract doesn't look as life-changing
Hmm.
when it's spread out over 3 years and requires you to sell a healthy number of books,
Right.
right? So now that's quitting my job isn't so much of an option, right? I
Right.
need to do something else to supplement that money. So I don't think people realize how many people, there are very few authors that I know that just do this.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
Very few.
usually, yeah, and usually it's because they did sell some sort of film rights.
Hmm.
It's not from the books. So it's a complicated economy, book selling is, but if you love to do it, you will give yourself a long enough runway to
Hmm.
try to succeed at it.
Yep.
And I think that's the part where a lot of people fall down, is they just are like, after a year or two, it's not working, it's not going to happen. I'm not going
Yeah.
to do this anymore. And
Well, I
so
want
that, yeah.
was going to add one more thing to the hundred
Mhm.
thousand because that's a great figure to play with. The fact that the payments are spread out, and then also people don't take into account is a lot of people have agents. So obviously your agent is getting normally 15% cut of whatever your deal is. Then you're also an independent contractor. So you're not working for a corporation or whatever who's paying a part of your tax load. You are a sole proprietor. You are the business. So you're really double taxation
Mhm.
compared to someone that works like myself. I work corporate America, and then at night I run a writing business and write novels when I get to actually write novels and all that,
Mhm.
and not marketing and all the other stuff I do, podcasts.
Yeah.
But it's all those other things. So yeah, the 100,000 number is a great one because people think that, oh, if someone got $100,000 deal, you probably can quit your job. It's like it's probably $25,000 you get in a year. Can you quit? And I mean, you're in probably one of the more expensive regions of the country, we could say. I
Yep.
live more in the south in a rural area, but still, I go to the grocery store sometimes every day because if I don't have my kids, I'll just go to the gym and swing by the grocery store. Groceries are expensive, and you can't go live off a $20,000 income, I think, anywhere in this country. That's talking multiple months. Sometimes you need that kind of money in some spots if you're in San Francisco or other places. So,
Yeah, I remember buying an old copy of a William Faulkner novel
mhm.
at a used bookstore, and in the introduction, Faulkner apologizes. He says the book is he apologizes for the quality of the book
Hmm.
because he had to write it while he was. I might be butchering this story. I'm sure you're gonna get your YouTube comments about this, but he was working on a train or some sort of steam train, and he was shoveling coal. Um, and he would do that for hours, and then
Right.
he would write when he wasn't working on the train.
Yeah.
And so he just wanted to let the reader know he was really sorry that he didn't do as good a job with that because he had another job,
Yeah.
right? So this is not new. Like this
Hmm.
is, it's always been a difficult road. And
Yes.
again, I think that the confirmation bias is you see people who are successful at it and you assume that that's the thing. I
Yeah.
think what has changed significantly is I used to make a perfectly fine living just writing for magazines.
Hmm.
And so I was able to make a living as a writer full time. I still do, really, but it's different now.
Hmm.
But back then I used to be able to be a freelance writer, and I would pitch stories to magazines, and I would make a perfectly fine living from that, and
Hmm.
I would still have the time to work on other stuff.
Right.
That part of the job has changed. And so
Yeah.
it's been a little bit more difficult to patch together all of those writing jobs to make a full-time writing career. And so you
Right.
tend to get into editing and other things, and you find other ancillary kind of businesses around it to do it,
Mhm.
but you still have to, it's still a hodgepodge of things versus I'm just writing all the time.
Right. I meant to start this off a different way too. I always
Well, let's start different way.
oh no. We're not starting a different way, but I do have a pertinent question for you. So are you in
Mhm.
Manhattan or you're just in the greater where
I'm in Brooklyn, so
you're in
I
Brooklyn?
live in Brooklyn Heights near the Brooklyn Bridge, and that's where
Okay.
I've grew up. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I lived for a brief time out in California, but for the most part, I've lived here my whole life.
One of my favorite things to walk across. I didn't do it for years until probably about 8 or 9 years ago. Now, every time I'm in the city, if I can possibly get down there, I will go walk across the bridge and just gawk at it and just be like, man, I've read read books about how it was built over the years, and I was like, I just never made it down there. And finally, I was like, okay, anytime I get down, and I asked that because this could steer the rest of our conversation. It's a total joke, actually, but Mets or Yankees?
Oh, Yankees.
Yankees, okay.
I think you when you grew up in New York,
Uh-oh.
that's okay. I don't take
I'm
it
kidding.
personally. I think when you grew up in New York, you tend to gravitate towards the team that was really good when you were a kid. And
Gotcha.
so my dad was a Dodger fan, and I became a Yankee fan in the late 70s,
Mhm.
because those were the teams of Reggie Jackson and Ron Guidry and Thurman Munson, and so had I grown up in the mid 80s, I probably would have been a Met fan because that was the teams of Keith Hernandez and Dwight
Right.
Gooden. So I think that growing up in New York, a lot of it is sort of relative to the time
To the
that you
time
grew up.
period. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Yankee Stadium is one. I've been multiple Mets games over the years. I've still not been to Yankee Stadium. So I show the Red Sox. I'm actually, so we're filming this on a Saturday morning. I'm actually going, it's kind of one of the last weekends of minor league baseball. And about an hour from me is Greenville, South Carolina, and they actually have the farm team for the Red Sox.
Hmm.
So I'm actually going to a game tonight and hoping to hit Fenway up maybe soon. I'm working on a plan for that. We'll see if I make it back up there. But I grew up in Connecticut. So kind of right in the middle of Boston, New York, and so you're one or the other.
Yep.
And whatever one you are, you obviously till the day you die have to hate the other, which is ridiculous, not true. But it was just kind of one and grew up going to Fenway Park. Green
Hmm.
Monster. I mean, I've got so many memories as a kid going to games there. But then I growing up in that spot of the country was wonderful because I'm in between two major historic and metropolitan areas is we go towards one or the other for different events. So coming down to the city, going to Broadway, doing shows, touristy stuff, going skating
Hmm.
Rockefeller Center, all that kind of stuff. Was just it was really cool experience. So now years later, I don't live near that part of the world, country. So now when I get to come back, I'll try to, like I said, try to do some things. I was actually in the city last spring. Bono was actually doing a book tour. And
Hmm.
so he actually did a show for his book at the Beacon Theater, and they actually turned it into a regular thing, like 6, 8 times a month for several months. So I actually came up in the city just for tickets with that. Dinner plans fell apart one night with friends, so I went and saw John Fogerty at Radio City Music Hall, which was just grabbed a ticket off Ticketmaster last minute, like 12 rows from the stage. Great experience. And then it was just rainy weekend, so I walked around, but I didn't want to get soaked the entire weekend, so I ended up going to see Wicked.
Hmm.
Just as again, I jumped on for like last minute tickets and went and got like 2 rows, kind of obstructed view, but like you could reach out and touch the stage. So, any chance to get in the city, I'm there. It's such a great place.
There's a lot to do. I think sometimes we take it for granted living here, how much there is to do.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there always is sort of those magical moments that
Hmm.
seem to happen daily here. I mean, for me, the one of the best things about living in New York is that most authors come through here.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I get to see a lot of people.
Hmm.
I always extend an invitation for lunch or dinner, or and a fair amount take me up on it. And we usually have a good time, and we'll go on
Yeah.
a little walking tour of the city. But yeah, it really is nice. I equate it to hanging out by the club bathroom. Like everybody passes by there once, right? So
Exactly.
everybody seems to pass by New York once. And usually I get to spend a little time with them, which is always nice.
Yeah, I like seeing your posts because I know you'll do a lot of events and go down like Mysterious Bookshop and different places. And yeah, it's such a that's the cool thing about I think the writing community, and that's the other thing is people tend to think it's very competitive. Well, if you write, then obviously you're probably not really buddies with the next writer there because you're competing against each other, and it's like that's like so far from the truth.
Hmm.
You know, you it just doesn't work that way. You know, my book is not a competition against your book. If my book does well, that doesn't mean your book's going to do poorly. So many days in the year available to people to read, and most readers out there rarely pick up one book and okay, this is my one book to read for the year. That's just not common. It's normally, especially our target audience, are people that that's what they enjoy doing is they enjoy
Hmm.
reading. So you're going to have a lot of availability for different authors and different books.
Yeah, I think that I think authors really appreciate how hard it is. And
Hmm.
so when they have a chance to support other people, they try to do that. I've been to countless readings at the Mysterious Bookshop where it's me, the person's agent, because their
Hmm.
agent's usually in New York. Maybe their publisher stops in because they're usually in New York. One or two family friends, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it could be heartbreaking when uh, you come into New York, there's a big reading, and there's not, and that room is half empty.
Back again for a tale of two scribes. So I have Michael Dolan on today, and we just happen to have a lovely internet snafu, which was my fault. Apparently, my internet connection here in the South decided to crap out on me. So we were having a wonderful discussion about readers and writers and going to the mysterious bookshop and possibly not many people showing up to book events. So let's keep talking about that because that's the other thing too that um people that don't know much about the industry, they probably see the podcasts or the live sessions that are streamed online, and they think, oh, when authors have these events, you know, Jack Carr comes into town and Brad Meltzer comes into town, and they get hundreds of people to show up. It does happen.
Mhm.
Doesn't happen for a lot of people though. Um,
Yeah, and there could be a variety of reasons why that is or isn't the case,
right,
and a lot of them have nothing to do with the author. You can have a reading and there's bad weather that day, and people
right.
decide they're not going to go, and so and it can be heartbreaking. You're looking forward to this, and it's one of the few chances you have to interact with
Hmm.
the readers, and so you really genuinely appreciate that opportunity. Um, and it's disappointing, but I
Yeah.
have made so many great friends just by going to readings
Hmm.
and attending and getting to meet them. You know, the we've talked about the bad side of Twitter, but the good side of Twitter is I've connected with so many creatives around the world
Hmm.
online. And so when I have an opportunity to actually meet them in person,
Yeah.
it just really magically solidifies those relationships.
Yep.
And so, when people are coming through town, I try to make it a point when I can to go see
Hmm.
them. Um, it's an hour. It's an hour out of your day. It's not
Right.
that. Sometimes it ends up being more. Sometimes we go to afterwards. It's great.
Sure.
But for the
Absolutely.
most part, I feel like it's really not like the value of the relationship versus the time that
Hmm.
you have to spend to create it. It's such a great value. It's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Well, what are you cutting out to do that? I found that just for myself, even to get into writing years ago, you know, time is your most valuable commodity, but we're really good as human beings at wasting our time on a plethora of things. And so at the time in 2014, when I started writing, I was married at the time, had two little kids, and it's like, okay, I want to craft a novel, but what am I going to give up to do that? I wasn't willing to give up family time or anything like that. So I gave up television. So I had a stretch there for quite a long time that 10 o'clock on at night, all I did was write. That's all I did.
Hmm.
There wasn't watching, and I would wouldn't always be Sunday, but I would take one night a week to kind of have a reset where instead of writing, I would watch something
Hmm.
partially just to kind of almost cleanse my palate of going, okay, I just need to. I started watching at one point though Breaking Bad, which was probably a bad way to try to cleanse my palate for writing, but I found something to entertain myself. What it ended up becoming, especially considering where you live is appropriate, is it ended up becoming Seinfeld. So I went through the Seinfeld series, I don't know how many times over the years of that would be my way. That would be my way to transition myself sometimes at night just to go to sleep. I'd write until midnight and then I'm kind of jacked up. Everyone else is asleep in the house and I'm kind of wanting to keep writing. And I'm like, okay, no, you need to stop. So I'd put on a Seinfeld episode and probably one I had seen a dozen times already. And that would kind of be my transition to go, okay, go to sleep.
Yeah, I think that you know, you're right. Time is an often misused resource, and people will say, "I don't have time to do this. I don't have time." And generally, what I take that to mean, and don't get me wrong, there certainly are people that are working multiple jobs, parenting, and
Yes.
all kinds of responsibilities, and it's difficult. But a lot of times the folks that usually tell me that often have other activities and hobbies and other things that they do. And
Hmm.
so that just tells me that, listen, it's no judgment. It's just that you prefer to do those other things.
Right.
You're having more fun doing those other things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
And then there are people that just they want to write, and so that is their fun thing.
Hmm.
That is what they enjoy doing. And so they prioritize. It's like exercise.
Yeah.
I don't have time to exercise. Everybody has time to exercise when they make it a priority. And
Right.
so that's it. To me, it's the same thing. It's like if the writing's a priority, you find the time for it. If it's not, and it's okay if it's not, but you're gonna put other things ahead of that on the
Hmm.
list, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I was at the gym last night, Friday night. Not always necessarily the most fun place to be on a Friday night, but single, went through a divorce a couple years ago. Instead of
Mhm,
going out partying on a Friday night, I'm also too old to go out and party on a Friday night. It's like I go to the gym, and there's
mhm,
like me and like six other people at the gym. It's the best night of the week to go to the gym because all the losers that don't have dates are just trying to buff up their body or whatever. But I get any machine whenever I want. I can stay as long as I want. And I always like even last night. I'm behind on a deadline for my next novel, and my brain was trying to tell myself, you probably should just stay here, sit on the back porch. It's a beautiful evening,
mhm,
work on your edits, and maybe go to the gym Saturday or Sunday. And I was just like, you dirty, rotten scoundrel. No, I'm going
mhm.
to the gym. That's my every other Friday night. I have my kids every other weekend, and every other Friday night I don't have them. So it's like that's my routine. So, and I always grumble to myself as I go to the gym. And as I walk out of the gym, it's cliche, but I feel like $1 million. I feel
You
great.
always feel better. You always
Yes.
feel better after.
Yes. And I always try
100%.
to tell myself, remember that next, when I go back on Monday and Tuesdays, I try to go a couple times a week. And then the following next time I do on a Friday, remember that feeling. And of course, human beings being the lazy creatures we are, we're kind of like, oh, there's football on tonight. Let's watch some football instead.
Mhm.
So,
And it's the same with writing. You
yeah,
don't want to do it, and you set the time aside, and even you may not be 100% thrilled what you did, but you're like, well, I got 1,000 words in. I got
right.
1,500 words in. You always feel better after you do it. It's a
You
struggle
always
to
do.
get there,
Yeah.
but it always seems to be rewarding.
Well, and you can't fix something unless you put it down to start with. So you have to write those words because I think a lot of times people that aren't comfortable in the writing process yet, they might fall into that trap and that pattern of, well, that chapter has to be perfect before I go write the next chapter. It's like, no, 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 write the chapter. Now, it might be garbage that you're writing, and you're going to find out in 3 months, 4 months when you finish it, and you go back and read it, and you're like, what was I saying? But man, you can fix something, but you can't fix something that you haven't written. So you've got to do that first step of getting that writing done. So
All the fun starts after the end of the first draft.
I used to not believe that, Michael. I used to, in 2014, I started writing and I loved writing my first novel. And I hated trying to edit it and then try to get an agent and all that stuff. And oh boy, it was like torture. And I finally mentally got over that hurdle of I don't know, I don't remember when it actually it clicked on me, but it did click and it kind of turned over the corner of actually because I think I always told myself, well, if you're editing, you're not writing, and you really want to be a writer, you don't want to be an editor. And then I realized at some point after a couple of years of doing it, it's like, no, man, you can take something that didn't work very well in the editing process and make it shine. And you get to
Mhm.
write new stuff when you're editing because you're going to remove things and you're going to put new stuff in. So I learned to embrace it. It did take me a while. And I do not dog editing anymore. But man, those first couple years, I was kind of like, let me get that next book out, which was probably why none of those books got published because I was just trying to get that story out of my head, and it
Mhm.
wasn't a refined story that needed to be in readers' hands.
Well, again, what we're talking about is sort of the misuse of time, and part of
Mhm.
that is um, and this is true of me, of everybody. You want it to get out, you want people to read it, and so you don't invest the time necessary to make it what it can be.
Yeah.
And so um, the work is never done. Like technically, like any work of art technically is done when someone consumes it, right? So you write the book, and when somebody reads it, that's it. It's complete.
Right.
But that being said, it's never done. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I talk to writers who read all the time, like read publicly all the time. They'll
Hmm.
go and they'll do a reading, and so many of them will say, I was tripping myself up because I was reading and I was rewriting it as I was reading it. And this is their book,
Hmm.
but they're always finding a better way. And so, it's like chess. Yeah, you got to checkmate in 12 moves, but how do you do it in 10?
Yeah.
Right. And so you're always kind of, and sometimes it takes a while to see it, but then you see it's like, oh, I wish I had done it this way.
Right.
And like I promise you, I use this analogy a lot. It's like Paul McCartney wishes he had Yesterday back to work on for 5 more minutes.
Hmm.
People think that's a perfect song, but he's like, yeah, but I would probably change this and I would
Yeah.
probably change that. And so there's the writing is rewriting.
Yep.
I was fortunate enough to learn that lesson very early. When I was in college, my sister was also in college and she was waitressing at a restaurant across from the theater in Times Square.
Okay.
And there was a very young playwright named August Wilson who had a show called Fences that
Mm.
was appearing across the street. And it was a huge deal for him. He won a Pulitzer Prize for it and became recognized rightfully as one of the best playwrights in the world. And he would sit in the bar across the street from the show that James Earl Jones was reading his words, and he would sit there with cocktail napkins and he would rewrite parts of the show. And he once told me, writing is rewriting, writing is
Mm.
rewriting, writing is rewriting. And so the process never ends. And
Yeah.
so, and it to the point where it could drive you crazy.
Sure.
But if you embrace that, if you rather than sort of letting it drive you crazy, if you embrace the idea that it can always get better and that you have the ability to make it better,
Hmm.
it can become really rewarding.
Yes.
And but it's a difficult mindset to switch to because as human beings are we want to cross things off the list. We want to be okay, that's done. And now I'm moving on to this.
Hmm.
And you want to get to the next thing, and it's really difficult to shift gears. But I
Yeah.
think that, if you I mean you've had Eli Craner on
Hmm.
before. Eli Broiler, which he has out now, was I think the first book that he wrote, or was one of the first books that
One
he
of his
wrote.
first ones. Yeah.
He certainly wrote it before Don't Know Tough and Ozark
Hmm.
Dogs.
Ozark
And
Dogs.
yeah, and so he had that sitting around for a bit, and he
Yeah.
wasn't quite ready to put it out. And I think I don't want to speak for him, but like the process, he wrote a couple of books that he didn't publish,
Hmm.
that he said he probably would never publish.
Right.
Then he did Don't Know Tough. He was developing the skills. He knew Broiler
Hmm.
was an important story that he wanted to tell. And I think that after he'd written, 6 books, maybe 7 books, of which he's only published two,
Right.
right? So he's got these other books that he's never published.
Yep.
Then he felt like he had the ability to go back and do it the way he wanted.
Hmm.
And even that, so here's a guy who really loves craft, right?
Hmm.
He respects the craft. He just puts so much into these books. And he told me, that book went back and forth with his editor about 6 times.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know about you, but every time I turn something into my editor, I'm like, that's done.
Right.
You know what I mean? And she'd come back and she'd like, well, maybe we can. And he'd go back, and to Eli's credit, he would, rather than just being like, you know what, I'm done. He was like, no, let's
Yeah.
keep an open mind.
Right.
and you go back and do it. And that's what makes him the writer he is,
Yes.
is that ability to have that open mind,
Hmm.
not see things as criticism, see it more as feedback,
Yep.
and
I agree.
take that feedback into heart and try to make it better.
Yeah. Well, and someone that he's now teaching others the craft. He's actually doing it, at local college there close by where he lives. So I think one of the more prolific writers of this generation, personally. And I've been fortunate to interact with him and obviously have him on the podcast. Great guy though. God, can't say high enough praise for Eli.
He told me this great story. He had his editor come down to his class, and she's a well-known writer in and of herself.
Hmm.
And what he does with the kids is when he has them submit their stories, they take the names off of them,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And so they're not bringing that bias of the person. They're just trying to
Right.
read the story. And
Yep.
he leaves it up to the student whether or not they want to say it's their work or not their work, or so on. So the editor
Hmm.
gave them something to edit, and they shredded her. You know what I mean? Like, and he said she did a really great job. She participated, like she critiqued herself to make it seem like it wasn't hers and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And you have to kind of not take it personally. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you have to just
Right.
realize that, like, for the most part, I think when especially people that you trust are giving you feedback, they're on
Hmm.
your side,
Right.
they're on your team. And it's the what I tell all my authors is it's your story. So I might have an idea of how something can be different, but
Mm.
it's still your vision and your voice and your
Right.
so you have it's not, you don't have to. Collaboration isn't I tell you what to do. And
Hmm.
collaboration isn't you tell me what to do. Collaboration is we try to get together and find what the best way forward is.
Right.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And that process can be bumpy at times and it can be messy at times, but if you're both open-minded about it, usually the result is much better than what you had.
Hmm. Absolutely agree. 100%. Yeah, I've been through that process multiple times now. Like I do, especially like early readers. I try to get once I feel like I got the book in a good spot. I've got a pretty decent sized list of readers that I can trust their opinion. No friends, family, anyone that's gonna be like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever." It's like,
Mhm.
no, that doesn't do me any good. I already know it's the best thing ever in my head. Not really,
Yeah.
actually. Half the time, I'm riddled with like, "Is this good? Is this better than the last one?" But those people will just give me the feedback I need, and some of those changes end up being significant change. Sometimes it's the little tweaks are the ones that I always find interesting. And it ends up being someone that had a background or an experience that overlapped with something my character is doing. And they will say, "Hey, I actually know how this works. You
Hmm.
almost got it right, but this is the actual way it happens." And those are the ones that are wonderful to fix because I know down the line someone might get that book that is in that industry or in that profession and be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's like, no, I just make up stories for a living. Of course, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to
Right.
entertain you and make it as accurate as I can, but I can't possibly know everything about everything. So,
Yeah, and the opposite sometimes happens where people don't show their stuff to anybody.
sure, that does happen.
There's a lot of times, like I'll go to conferences where they'll have pitch events,
Hmm.
and I always ask the same two questions. How many of you are pitching for the very first time? And usually
Okay.
there's a huge number of hands that go up. And
Yeah.
the second question I ask is, how many people have not shown this to anyone yet? And again, a huge
A
number of
lot.
hands go up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so you're pitching me something and no one else has seen this except for me.
Hmm.
And that's not great. Like
Right.
you really do need to have Stephen King has people read his work, but it's
Mhm.
people he trusts, people like
Right.
Amy Tan. And like, so, you have to get very comfortable with that collaborative process. But
Hmm.
again, the critical part is people that you trust. It's not
Yes.
strangers. It's like you said, it's not well-meaning family members that are cheering for you. It's people that have the skill and the ability to give you the proper feedback, that will be useful for your time, you
Right.
know. So, and it can be tough to assemble that group. People
Absolutely
that are
is. Yeah.
willing to take the time to do it, willing to give you proper feedback, all that stuff. It's not easy to get those people, but it's well
Mhm.
worth it to try to find them.
Yeah. I've got a book coming out end of this year that got to go to the editor in about 3 weeks, and so I'm comfortable with it, but uncomfortable with it in the same regard. So I've got two people that have this skill set in a way of what these
Mhm.
characters are going through, and they're supposed to get it by early next week. So this is my weekend of like, okay, dude, you better be cool with it at this point because they know. Tear it up. Tear it. Tell
Yeah.
me what's wrong because I have 3 weeks or less than that at that point to fix it before it goes to the editor. And like you're talking about before, to me, the process never ends. But for me personally, the way I run it is it ends when I give it to my editor. Now, my editor obviously can make changes, yes, and suggest things, absolutely. But I don't make any fundamental changes after that point unless it's something the editor pointed out because A, I'm paying my editor myself since I run the business. And that's my kind of like, I've got the spot where I believe in it. I can make some tweaks, but once I agree to the editor's changes, then I put it to bed. Then that file gets saved. I do my formatting and all the other stuff to get ready for publication, and then I don't allow myself to fix it anymore, basically. But one of the things I don't want to get to is your background. So, because I think you've
Okay.
got a fascinating background. So, I want to ask about the boxing. So, how does the boxing affect? Is it something that you started like as a young person, and what did you do with that? And do you still do it now?
I still do it now.
Still do it
I
now.
did
Okay.
not really do it much at all as a young person. I
Okay.
always was a boxing fan.
Okay.
And
Well, you got to be
then
rough and tumble to be in the Bronx. So, you got to have the.
I I did it a little bit on and off in my 30s.
Okay.
And then I fell woefully out of shape. I was weighing about 210 pounds.
Hmm.
I was I was running a magazine for professional athletes at the time. And it was very stressful and I was feeding my feelings
Hmm.
and I just really I was walking my I live the subway station near my house is several levels underground because it's near the water and the tunnel
Okay.
goes under the water. So
Gotcha.
you have to go down about 6 flights of stairs, 8 flights of stairs to get to the bottom.
Okay.
And one day the escalator was out and I was in my suit and I had my laptop and I was walking up all these stairs and everybody was passing me,
Yeah.
senior citizens that couldn't walk, babies, dogs. So I just was like, I can't live like this anymore.
Yeah.
So I called a friend who put me in touch with somebody, and I
Hmm.
went to the boxing gym the next day. And I worked out that first day, and I was so out of shape and so tired that when I went to take the subway home, I literally sat on the platform, like not in a seat. I sat on the filthy New York City train platform because I could not stand for another
Wow.
30 seconds to wait for the train.
Wow.
But it got better.
Yeah.
And one day started to become 2 days a week. And then 2 days
Hmm.
started to become 2 days a week. And by the time I was done, I had ended up losing around 60 pounds.
Wow.
And I was in the proverbial best shape of my life. And
Hmm.
I never looked back.
Yeah.
I've had some up and down fluctuations, but for the most part, I've kind of been in a steady way. But I had no idea the impact it was going to have
Hmm.
on my life in a variety of ways, not just the fitness, but the camaraderie of the friendships I've made,
Yep.
the people I've met, the boxing community, especially the pro boxing community. You would think these guys are really rough and tumble, and they are to a degree, but for the most part, they're the nicest people you'd ever want to meet.
Hmm.
And they were very welcoming. It's the kind of thing I try to explain to people, like if you love baseball, you would never really have the opportunity to take batting practice alongside Aaron Judge,
Hmm.
right? Boxing, you do that all the time. You're in the gym and guys are training for their fights and you're right with them and they're with you and you're all in it together and you're all supporting each other and they couldn't be more helpful,
Right.
so it's like there's that aspect of it. Um, and then the other aspect of it, it just pushes you in ways that you didn't, it really has helped me face a lot of internal fears,
Sure.
right? Because you go in the ring and you get punched in the face and you say, okay, it wasn't too bad. I'm
Hmm.
still here. I'm still alive. And so, when you go and you spar in the morning, you get punched in the face at 7:30 in the morning. The rest of the day is easy, right? And so, like, I think that there's that aspect of it too, is that it challenges you in ways that you realize you things in perspective, and you
Mhm.
realize that like this other stuff isn't so
This
difficult.
is, yeah, exactly.
People are going through much worse things than I am. People are having much more difficult times than I am. Things may not be going my way at
Right.
this moment or happening as quickly as I would like them to happen, but I'm not in inherent danger
Hmm.
at the moment.
Yep.
And so, and boxing is just constantly having to pay attention because otherwise there are dire consequences.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise, you're gonna get
so
hit in the face.
yeah, a lot, really hard. And so that I think there's that part of it too, is just the awareness and the preparation that
Yeah.
it takes before. So there's just so many things. Like I've really thought about doing some kind of a book about boxing and writing
Yeah.
because I do think that there's a lot of cross-pollination
Right.
with the two things. Um, but I just haven't had been able to focus
It,
on getting like I haven't really found the spine of it, you
right.
know. But I love it. I meet great people there every day. Our gym is actually on down the street from the Freedom Tower in New York City.
Okay.
And we're on the first floor and there's these big windows. So I'm probably on 20 people's Instagram pages a day without knowing because people come in and take pictures in the ring and all and I'm floating around in the background. So
That's awesome.
it's been such a wonderful addition to my life. And the people at Trinity Boxing Gym, my big brother Martin Snow, like I just love them so much. I just can't imagine life without them.
Hmm. Now, so is it near Trinity Church?
Yeah, it's about 2 blocks away.
Okay. Okay. So I know the area pretty well. So okay, that's awesome. Well, that I think now you're gonna have to do something writing wise with the boxing, and then that actually would steer into the thing that we talked about offline before we came on originally is the coffee table book that you were mentioning. Which I think that's a great idea though.
So for the people listening at home, Eric and I were talking about I complimented Eric on this beautiful setup he has behind him, and he was telling me about, well, you should see what's on the other side of the camera.
Yep.
And I said I want to do a coffee table book that's just two pictures. One is um, people's podcast setups or home studios, whatever it is that they do, the YouTube or wherever they're broadcasting from. And then the opposite page is the reverse image of
Mhm.
what's in the rest of the room, the
What's the
dog bed, all the other stuff that's lying around. I think that um, it's just funny how we live these online lives
hmm
and we have to kind of, for purposes of marketing and putting our best foot forward to sort of create this vision of what we want, how we want to be seen.
Yeah.
And then there is the rest of it.
Yeah.
And everybody has the rest of it. This is not unique. Like
Right.
when you step out and but I just the other coffee table book I want to do, which goes back to the magazine business, was um we before digital photography, we would have to when we'd set up photo shoots, we would have to basically take Polaroids of things
Okay.
to make sure that all the lighting was correct
Hmm.
and that everything was the way you wanted because you were shooting on film and you didn't know what you had
Right.
until you got the film back.
So you got film
So
back.
you,
Yeah.
the Polaroid was a way to get an instant snapshot of do we need
Okay.
to adjust the lights? Is the perspective right and all that stuff. And so every photographer has these Polaroids of their assistants who were dressed like they just stumbled out of Lollapalooza, sitting in these in glamorous settings, that they've reserved for the movie star that's going to be on the cover or the
Right.
band that's going to be on the cover. And then there's some kid in it, like a South Park ski cap, that's sitting in this thing. I was like, we just have to do something with all these pictures. Like, can we gather all these pictures
Yeah.
I just thought that would be like, I just love the juxtaposition of the imaginary and the real. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And I think that that's always visually, as the magazine editor in me always really appreciated that.
No, absolutely. Well, and you bring up a good point too, because we're both of the age, and we grew up in probably one of the most remarkable times in human history. Because we grew up before the true internet age kicked in. I was born in 1976, so I have a lot of formative memories of the 80s. We
Mhm.
didn't have we didn't have these devils floating around that consume our lives, which we allow it to. So it's, shouldn't allow it to at times.
Yeah.
Um, but we just had this, and I speak about it, like my son is like constantly reminding me how jealous he is that I grew up when I did, because he thinks to grow up now, he's 17, to grow up in this decade is just crap. Does not like phones, does not like social media, any of the trappings that come with that. But
Hmm.
he looks back at when I grew up in the 80s, he's like, man, I mean, you had, the best rock music, the best movies, you had just had all these things. And in a way we really did though. We just it was things were just different. And so we've been able to transition as we've gotten older into seeing the way things happen now. But the downside of that is now you almost can't trust what you see or hear. Back then you could. Like I've told that to people. I was like, man, years ago I could sit there and I could meet someone and I'd have to meet them physically and you'd get to know them. Well, now you meet someone on Facebook and you see pictures of their life and you're probably seeing the 2% of their life. They're posting the best things that are happening to them and the most fun and the people they're meeting and all that stuff. They're not showing their laundry basket. They're not
Yeah.
showing their whatever. They're not showing the fact that their dog crapped on the floor 10 minutes before the podcast started and they have to go clean it up or maybe not clean it up immediately.
Hmm.
So, you're showing your best. And so, yes, you definitely have to think about the fact of what you're seeing isn't always it's not always it's a reality for that second or that moment, but it might not be the reality of what the person's normal everyday life is.
Yeah, but I think your son is unique in that way because I think most kids I have a 17-year-old son as well. I think most
Mhm.
kids that age would, there's no way they would trade their phone and
Oh
the
no,
internet, all that
he
other
is
stuff.
unique, absolute hundred
You know what I
percent,
mean? Like I,
100%.
I think it's different. I don't think it's, I never look at it as better or worse. I just look at it as different.
It's different. Okay.
I like I my friend Ada Calhoun wrote this wonderful book called St. Mark's is Dead. St. Mark's Place is this famous street in New York City that for decades has been a home for artists and counterculture people
Okay.
and it's in the East Village and it has a life of its own and she grew up there
Hmm.
and she lives there now
Okay.
and the premise of the book is that every 10 years or so um a generation of people say, oh, St. Mark's is dead, right? It's over. It's
Hmm.
over, right? And so, and that the last generation that she interviewed for the book, they said St. Mark's was dead because the Starbucks that was on the corner that they was there when they went to NYU closed. And they just couldn't imagine life without that Starbucks,
Couldn't
right?
imagine that. Oh my goodness.
So the thesis that Ada puts forth, and I think she's correct on this, is that everybody thought the best time for St. Mark's Place was the time that they were physically their most attractive,
Valid point.
right? Because they just had the world at their feet and people wanted to talk to them and they were center of attention and all that stuff. And so everything around that glow was
Yeah.
great. And everything that isn't. And
Yeah.
so I think that we tend to at times romanticize
I mean,
things
yeah.
when we grow up and what have, but like you know, today's kids got it pretty good. Like I remember during the pandemic when everybody was trapped at home,
Hmm.
and feeling a bit isolated.
Right.
I made a lot of friends online because everybody was home.
Hmm.
And so I connected with someone from Germany who
Right.
was a big David Bowie fan the way I was. And
Hmm.
she told me that she had been to his last concert in Germany and oh, how she wished she could hear that again and so I said, you know what? I wonder if this exists.
Hmm.
Like, I wonder if a recording of this concert exists.
Hmm.
So I look on the internet, and within 10 minutes, I found a guy in the Netherlands who had a list of all of these concerts that David Bowie had done
Hmm.
that, in theory, there are recordings to. And so I
Okay.
reached out to the guy and I said, listen, I don't even know if you speak English because everything was in Dutch.
Hmm.
And I said, but I'm looking for this concert. Um, you know, I know it's illegal to sell these things for copyright purposes, but if hypothetically I was looking to find this, could you point me in the right direction on where I might be able to find it?
Hmm.
And the next morning I woke up And the guy said, I have it. I will email it to you. And pick two other concerts that you like, and I'll send you all three.
Wow.
Right. So I'm thinking, this is great. So the guy retransfers me the files. And now I'm thinking, did he send me a virus that's going to collapse my computer and empty my bank account? Right. And so now I'm faced
Exactly.
with this dilemma of which kids face today, right? Is this
Right.
person who he says he is, or is this person a thief? And
Yep.
so I said to myself, trying to rationalize, well, I sought him out. He didn't seek me out. Right.
Hmm.
So I'm going to operate under the fate that he's up. Sure enough, I downloaded it. There were these three amazing concerts.
Hmm.
So I took the concert, sent it to the woman in Germany, and she was just ecstatic. I can't believe like you made this. That
Right.
all happened, Eric, within the span of about 18 hours.
Yeah. Oh
That
no.
never would have happened in
Right.
1988. Right. And so like the world's a different place. And I think that and we can dovetail this back into books if we'd like to bring the conversation back to that. The
Sure.
world has changed. The way people consume things have changed. The way
Hmm.
we read, the way we interact with culture has changed. If you embrace that, if you welcome that, if you
Hmm.
welcome new ways of doing things, then this is the best time in the world ever to be an author. And it's the best time in the world ever to be a reader.
Yeah.
And that's great. If you nostalgically long for that time where authors did 100 city book tours and they did this and that and the other thing.
Hmm.
It's like that just isn't really the reality anymore. And the
Right.
more that you wallow in that nostalgia, the unhappier you're going to be. And
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
really not a reason to be unhappy. There are other ways to do this where you can find joy in it.
Yeah. No, and I think you're 100% right. In that regard, this time of human history, if you enjoy writing, um, and if you can craft a story that's, just decent. We don't even have to say a great story, a decent story, you can absolutely get published. Even if it's just self-published, you can absolutely get published where 30 years ago, you were completely at the mercy of the suits of people in charge of publishing companies, and you were mailing your manuscript off to someone, sending a postage paid envelope to return the information, so there was no ability to do what we do now, several decades ago. And I mean, in our lifetime, it's not like, well, this was our grandparents' lifetime or whatever. Like, no, this is like a lifetime that we have lots of memories before the online portals were there. So I do agree with that 100%. The opportunities that have been opened up. We're talking on a thing that 20 years ago, there was no such thing. My first cell phone I got, I think, was 1997, 1998. Just, flip phone. I think it had text ability. You had to pay for
Yeah.
each text. You had to, yeah, I think it had 400 minutes a month that came with the plan for phone calls, or then I was paying like 23 cents a minute or something crazy to go over. So yeah, now the wonderful thing, like you just mentioned about the afraid the guy was going to steal your file. I was doing something with my kids last weekend and I had a text, and I don't have alerts or anything on. I picked my phone up and I saw I had a text from Wells Fargo. I was like, oh, my bank. What's going on? Did I get a deposit? Do I have some more money? Oh no, someone in Teterboro, New Jersey or whatever had got my business credit card somehow. And did you authorize a $550 payment at Walmart in Teterboro, New Jersey?
Yeah.
No. And said, okay, we've frozen your account. So then, of course, I got to call this week and get a new card set up and all that.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to the lady and I'm like, pretty common thing now, right? She goes, oh, dude, all day long.
Yeah,
All,
it happens a
all day.
lot. And
We have a whole division for this.
there's always a downside. There's always a price to pay. I mean, I used to write a lot of stories for Wired magazine.
Okay.
And I think all technology stories kind of have two acts. The first is, wow, this technology is amazing. I can't believe they can do that. And then the
Right.
second act would be like, I never expected people to use it for that. Right?
Yes.
There's always somebody that kind of finds a way to pervert the technology and use it in a way it wasn't intended to take advantage of people. And
Yep.
so that's always the case. But there's always a price to pay, but there's no reason to throw out the good stuff for the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And
Thrown out.
so,
Yeah.
and with I was having a conversation with my buddy Wes Brown, who came up through New York, who's a great author,
Mhm.
has a book coming out soon. And we were just talking about physical books. And I was just like, are we just kidding ourselves with physical books now? Like, are we
Right.
just like, like, are we like, music has thrown up the flag, right? Everything is on your phone that you could stream and listen to, right? And
Yeah.
people love the fact that they can listen to whatever they want,
Hmm.
whenever they want. And you can carry that entire body of music around, right?
Right.
And so, but yet we're insistent on carrying a 600-page book with
Hmm.
us on vacation.
Yep.
And so I have to think that somewhere in the timeline generationally, there's going to be a point where people are just like, what are we doing?
Right.
Like I just want a reading device and I can bring 100 books on vacation.
Yep.
And if I don't bring it, I could check it out or buy it right on the spot or whatever.
Yep.
So I think
Absolutely.
we, as authors and publishers, constantly have to be looking at this
Hmm.
and reimagining it. I know that at Brooklyn Book Festival, which we have coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to try something where we're like, look, we have the physical copies of the book here. If you buy the book, we'll send you a digital version of it.
Hmm.
Because why should you pay twice for it? So if you
Right.
don't want to carry it around, um, you'll have the physical book if you want the nice book that the author has
Hmm.
signed on your shelf. But
Right.
then if you want something to carry on the train with you, you can download the digital version and you can take it with you wherever you want to go. Because the end game, the purpose is we want you to read it.
Want you to
And
read it. Yeah,
so
exactly.
why are we putting an imaginary fence around what is just another version of something that you already purchased?
Yep.
And this was something that drove me mad in the music industry because I was like, I bought Exile on Main Street on vinyl. I bought it on cassette. I bought it on
That's
CD. I
yeah.
bought it on iTunes. And now I have to rent it from Spotify. How many
Right.
times am I paying for this album? And
Right.
so, like, I think as booksellers, like, let's be smarter and let's find a way that people can appreciate this how they want to appreciate it. And the author still gets compensated for it. But
Right.
we're taking into account how the user wants to use it
Mm.
and consume it.
Yeah. So, what's your crystal ball look like for that? Because I'm grappling with that myself, with start my own imprint, and I've been open with people. The vast majority of my sales these last couple years, even without when I was with a smaller publisher, vast majority were ebooks. And years ago, I always thought, man, I don't want to read ebooks. I don't want to. I don't want to go into that realm. Well, now from a publishing standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, I see that that's where the majority of it is. Yes, I sell physical books, but I sell vastly more, like in the neighborhood of 75 or 80% of my sales are ebooks.
Yeah.
And it might even be higher than that with some of the books. I've never not even looked like fine tuned to numbers this year very much. I've just looked at the high level numbers. So it's just crazy how much that's grown, and that's not going to flip back. You're not going to. I don't think you're going to have people all of a sudden say, you know what, forget this ebook technology. I want to have a shelf of all these books. They're like, no, if I enjoy reading, I think if anything, maybe the e-readers will get more user friendly or more uh, appealing for people. But even I think people have gotten over that, where I was against them for a while. And when my first book came out on ebook, guess what I bought? I bought an ebook, and I bought the first copy as soon as it came available.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to do that.
I think there will always be physical books for this reason. The I think as we have seen in recent days, there are certain people that would like certain books to disappear. And so I think there would be if everything was digital, I think there would be a general concern that if somebody controlled that digital property, they can make it go away. And
Okay.
so a physical book, right? That's what libraries and all that, the Library of Congress and all that was a way to protect this intellectual property and not allow
Right.
that to happen, right?
Right.
And so I think there will always be room for physical books for that reason. It's sort of a way to diversify the intellectual property so that someone can't control it and make it go away. And you're seeing that now with the sort of resurgence of people collecting DVDs because
Hmm.
when a company will purchase something the streaming rights to something. And then if they take it off, if and I'm not going to point any specific service out, but if the service takes that off, well, now I can't get it.
Right.
So how can I watch it? Like you own it and you won't let me see it.
Right.
So what am I going to do? So I think there's that aspect of you want the physical book,
Hmm.
and it helps protect from that.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is, you know, the way we do business in the book company has changed. It used to be a publisher would do a print run,
Mhm.
right? They would take sort of a best guess at how many books they could publish or sell rather. And
Yeah.
so they would say, you know, hey, Eric, we think we're going to sell 50,000 copies of your book. So we're going to do a first print run of 50,000 copies and we'll see how it goes. And they put them in bookstores wherever they could sell them. And if it sold well, you'd go to a second printing and maybe a
Right.
third, maybe a fourth. And once it got to the point where bookstores were like, hey, it's not really selling anymore at the end, the publisher would call you up and say, Eric, look, we've sold a lot of books. We're really appreciative. We're going to take it out of print now because it's just not selling. The
Hmm.
books are going to get remaindered or whatever the case may be. Well, now with print on demand, your book is available indefinitely.
Right.
Your unborn grandchildren will be making royalties from Body Man and Breach of Trust because you'll have the copyright on that for 100 years, right?
Right.
So that's always going to be available. And having it available digitally makes a lot of sense because,
Hmm.
as more and more books come out every day, where are all these things going to be inventoried? Where are they going to be
Yeah.
housed? Where are they going to be in your house?
Right.
Right. And so having books digital makes a ton of sense for a
Mm.
variety of reasons. And so both of these things can coexist. But I think what happens is a lot of people are still very longing and nostalgic for,
Hmm.
and I understand when you're an author, I want a hardcover.
Yeah.
I want to be in Barnes and Noble. I want to do a book signing in Barnes and Noble. That was always my dream.
Right.
I, right. And I always tell the authors, like, look, if that's your dream, you should do it.
Hmm.
Like, if that is important to you and that's special to you, you should do it.
Right.
That being said, if you wanted to do a book event for your friends and your family, you want to do a signing, we can do it at sort of a neutral territory where you're going to get the majority of the royalties for the book. The
Hmm.
bookseller's not going to take a huge percentage of
Right.
the cut, right? And so there are a lot of different ways to do this. The most important thing is what's most important to you. And
Hmm.
so is that experience, is it more important for you to have a hardcover? Is it more important for you to have an event at the local bookstore that you always dreamed of having? Is it more important for you to make revenue and to try
Right.
and build a writing career where you're trying? Sometimes these things don't coexist. And so
Hmm.
you have to kind of prioritize what's important to you and then make a plan around that,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm constantly trying to encourage authors. I had one author who is with us now, but when I was talking to her about a book, she said, "What's your definition of successful book?"
Hmm.
I thought that's a great question. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And I think she was expecting me to say, "Well, if we sell this many copies, we'll make money."
Right.
Right. And what I told her is, I said, look, I think you're a really talented writer. I hope you write a number of books with us. So my definition of a successful book as it relates to you is I want you to create a book that you're very proud of, that's a foundational book in your career,
Hmm.
that you're never going to hide, that you're going to be that you're like, this is at this time, this was the best book that I can do, and it stands the test of time. And to me, that's successful. And I like to think, maybe naively, that if it is that standard and that quality, readers will eventually find it.
Right.
And so, again, time. You have to give yourself a long enough runway for readers to find it. You
Hmm.
have to be able to have the competitive stamina to market it for a long period of time, right?
Right.
And this is the other thing. I tell authors this, and they shake their heads and they don't believe me, but it's true. The How long do you think the average author, and I'm talking the average author,
Okay.
spend promoting their new book? If you had to take a guess on a time frame.
Oh, not me because my number is very high. So probably on average though, man, I bet you it's less than a month.
2 weeks.
Two
See,
weeks. Yeah.
Eric, you're right on. Yeah, you're right on point.
Yeah.
Right? They treat it like a Broadway opening.
Right.
It's grand opening. They open the doors. A lot of people don't come in. It didn't work, and they shut it
Yeah.
down. Right? The How long do you think a highly successful, like the people that are sort of at the top of the game, how long do you think they spend promoting?
Uh, well, they never stop promoting. So I guess for the current book that comes out, I'm sure it's much longer than a month. So, I don't know, let's say 6 months,
3 years.
3 years. Wow. Okay.
And when you think about it, because the book comes, if you're a highly successful author, hardcover will come out. You'll be promoting it before that. It'll
Right.
come out. It'll go to paperback. You might even tour on the paperback and
Yep.
promote that. And if you're lucky, there are some sort of screen opportunities for you, so you continue to promote it. There might be foreign rights things that you're promoting, and and so you will continuously promote it because you believe in it,
Right.
and you know that like every person that hasn't seen it, it's a new book to them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so as long as you don't treat it like something that's stale, they
Right.
won't treat it
They
like
won't.
something that's
Yeah.
stale, right? And so if you bring that same energy and enthusiasm into something, it doesn't matter that it's been out for six, unless I would say with the caveat, if you've written something that is nonfiction, that is timed to an event,
Right.
then yes, there probably is a shelf life. If
There's a
you
shelf
wrote
life. Yeah.
something about the World Cup and you timed it to the World Cup, the interest may go down
Right.
significantly after the event. But bar that, a work of fiction you would like to think would have a much longer shelf life than that. And
Yeah.
so, as long as you have that same enthusiasm and you're willing to try new things and try new marketing ideas and strategies and such, like you can sell that book as long as you want to.
As
You're
long as you want to.
100%
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So good example for me would be Above My Head, The Body Man. So
Mhm.
this is the second edition because the publisher ended up going out of business and I put it out under my own brand. But that original book came out in November of 2021. So we're getting close now to the 3 year mark for that. I still every day am marketing that book, and that book is still selling copies every single day, 3 years
Yeah.
out. So, so what you say for me in my experience completely rings true, basically. And part of that too that helps is why I do that as well is it's a series. So I always want to steer people back to the first book in the series, and if they enjoy it, then obviously the anticipation is they will then buy the second book, and then I'll come out with a third book here next year, and you know, keep rolling the dice basically with it.
Yeah, and we haven't really touched on any of this type of stuff yet, but when it comes to like the dark arts of Amazon ads and
Hmm.
things of that nature, right? Um, it's a lot more beneficial to have three books than one
Right.
because for that reason, right? If you advertise Body Man and you have two other books in that series, there's a chance that that one ad will result in three sales.
Right.
And so the math starts to get more beneficial for the author. If
Hmm.
you're just advertising one book, you're lucky if you break even. You're more likely going to lose money
Hmm.
because you're only converting a percentage of the people that are clicking through on the ad. And
Right.
so while you are finding new readers and you hope that they're going to continue to read what you create, you don't have something ready for them,
Right.
right? And so that's the challenge too.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing I wanted to say real quick is that um, and you probably experience this now because you're doing this on your own and you have your own imprint.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't have to be sacrosanct. Like you can open the book up again. Like if you have other like let's say you're doing Body Man and you're going to do a series on that, right?
Hmm.
What's to stop you from putting the first chapter of the second book in at the end of Body Man so that people
Correct.
can see and be like, "Oh, I'm in on that. Let me see if that's available." And
Right.
so I think there are things that you have to have an open mind to. Um, and this isn't just true of self-publishing. Like we're publishing an author's second book,
Hmm.
and you know we were all about doing that for her, opening the book up, putting that first chapter, second book. Like we
Yep.
wanted to find more readers. So a
Yep.
lot of times these are conversations that you can have with your publisher to see if they're amenable to doing stuff like this. And I
Mhm.
think that it is like you should be flexible. It's not like the book is printed, that's it. We can't touch it. Like, of
Right.
course you can touch it.
Yeah.
So I encourage authors to really try to take a step back once in a while. Be like,
Hmm.
am I doing this the best way I can do it? Is there another look and see what other people are doing,
Yep.
that's working and borrow greatly from that.
Yep.
And so we do that all the time. If I see something, I admire people when they figure out a way to do something.
Hmm.
So I think that it's like you can either feel bad about it and just be like, I just want to write. I don't want to sell books. I don't want to I don't want to do this marketing. I'm not good at it.
Right.
Um, or you can embrace it and kind of make a game out of it and
Hmm.
have fun with it
Yeah,
and try to enjoy it. And I
absolutely.
think the one thing I'm very fortunate about is we have a great group of authors and they're very supportive of each other and they help each other. We're working on an anthology now that's just our authors.
Okay.
And my hope is to, if we can complete it, to give it away.
Okay.
And with the idea being that it's a chance for people to sample all of our
Just sample
authors'
your stuff.
work,
Yeah.
and for some people from who like this author to discover that author, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. And people would still be able to buy a copy of it if they wanted that nice copy to
Hmm.
put behind them during their podcast. They can own it. But for the most part, it's an opportunity. Your best skill, marketing skill as an author is your ability to write. And
Right.
so why wouldn't you write something as goodwill and just be like, I'm here, reader, I'm giving this to you as a thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and at least you're having a relationship with that reader and you hopefully like you're having a communication with that reader
Mhm.
and you're actually understanding who those readers are versus selling those books in Barnes and Noble where you don't know who they are.
Right. Exactly. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, again, you're finding ways to find your market, and the days of an author just writing something, handing it off, and then going back and just writing the next thing and not showing their face or doing anything, it's over. It's not, and that's not coming back. You're not going to have authors, even well-known authors, they're out there having to do promotion. And some do a lot more than others, obviously, but it's a constant. You have to get out there and promote. And if you can cross promote, if you can find other people to work with to help promote each other, then it's going to help everybody basically.
Yeah, and you have to find a way. You have to be. You don't want to be penny wise. You have to find a
Mhm.
way to have people sample what you do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you're asking people to fall in love with you without going on a date with them.
Hmm.
And so it's a really tricky. You better be damn good looking. You
You
know what
bet.
I mean?
Right.
So like that's part of it is like you just want and it's a you walk into a bookstore and it's discouraging because there's an ocean of books.
There's so
And
many
how are
books.
people going to find my little tiny dinghy?
Right.
And you know what I mean? And so you have to find ways to invite people to your rowboat. And
Hmm.
you have to find ways to make them feel comfortable staying and helping you row.
Yeah.
And part of that is getting them to sample your work. If you do an event, make it fun. I
Hmm.
went to an event. I'm sorry if I'm jumping around for people at
Oh,
home.
not a
I went
problem.
to a book
No.
event last month. A author by the name of Chuck Tingle, who's a wonderful horror author. He and I did a panel together at StokerCon, just to
Okay.
show you the kismet of how all this stuff works. So we randomly got assigned to a panel. Chuck is anonymous. He wears a pillowcase over his head, and he has these really flamboyant suits, and he's quite a character, right? But everywhere you go, that's Chuck Tingle.
That's
And
right.
so
You
he
recognize that pillowcase.
he puts a lot of effort into and thought into how he communicates with readers and how he connects with readers. And he's built a wonderful audience. So
Okay.
Chuck was doing a an event at the Strand to launch his book. I was like, I gotta go see my man. So we went
Hmm.
out and it changed the way that I thought of book events because
Hmm.
he did not read from the book at all.
Hmm.
He did not really even talk about the book at all. He had a huge audience there, and he had created this wonderful presentation that he had done on PowerPoint. And it was he made a dating game with the dating profiles of different monsters. And he was like, which monster would you prefer to date? And he had all of these different horror monsters,
Uh-huh.
and people roared and they
Yeah.
clapped and they cheered. And there was such joy at this event.
Right.
And it was the exact opposite of somebody sitting down and being like, I'm going to read my first chapter to you.
Right.
Right? And you're going to sit still and quiet and you're going to listen.
Listen.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, man, this just completely changed my idea of what a book event could be or
Yeah.
should be. And so that to me, and I'm not saying everything has to be a spectacle, but he
Hmm.
found something that
Right.
clearly connected with his audience because the
Yep.
room was packed and he sold a ton of books and did not talk about the book once. And
Right.
so I think we have to sort of embrace these opportunities that things are
Hmm.
different and
Yeah.
embrace the possibility that I can do something that's a little bit unique. And, so maybe you set up a table for your book, not at a bookseller, but at a different event
Hmm.
where you think there's a crossover between your book and the audience,
Yeah.
right? So if art is part of your book, maybe you do it at a gallery. So, like you
Hmm.
have to kind of find
Yeah.
different ways. Like you, instead of just following the line, like make your own line.
Yep.
But the world allows you to do that now, where it didn't.
Right. Most successful book event I had was actually up the road from me, about 45 minutes at a brewery last summer. And the guy that manager of the brewery let me, he said, "Where do you want to set up?" And I was like, "Well, just high visibility." And he's like, "I will put you," because big, huge outdoor area, and they'd have live music and stuff, but you had to walk through the main way to order your drinks, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whatever you wanted. You had to walk through that. He set me up right there where they had to walk by me, and I had posters set up. I had that. Everyone that came by, I made some comment to, like, "Hey, you got to buy a book if you're going to have a drink." Most time, and I'd laugh, and
Yeah.
they'd know it was a joke. But one after another, people started buying books because I wasn't just some author stuck in the corner of a room, and they kind of look over and go, "Who's that? Oh, who cares?" No, I put myself in a position where they had to go buy me, and a lot of them didn't buy a book, and that was totally okay. Actually, it was ironic. I just thought about it. I hadn't thought about this story in a long time. So this woman comes up at one point, and is looking at the book, and I'm asking her if she has any questions, and she's just kind of smiling, and she picks it up, and she ends up walking off with it.
Mhm.
And she said he'll pay for it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." That's what she said. He'll pay
She
for
brought a
it.
book boyfriend. Yeah.
Well, and so the story's sad in a way, but it was just one of those moments that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So all of a sudden the woman's gone. I don't see her anywhere. And I pay for all these books. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
selling them, but I'm the one buying them, and I'm planning to at least recoup my money. Um, she's gone. Okay, that was weird. Well, like 20 minutes later, an older gentleman walks up, and he's got my book, and he goes, "I think my wife took this." I was like, "Oh, okay, no, okay. Is she buying it?" He's like, "No, she has dementia. She has no idea of
Oh,
what she was doing, whatever." And I
oh,
was like, "Well, do you want the book? You can keep the book. I don't." Then I felt bad because I
right,
was
right,
like,
right.
why'd this person steal my book? And it's just,
Yeah.
but one of these things that happen, that you're out with people that you never expect to see happen, did occur. But that was something though that for it kind of not haunted me for a while, but it kind of came back into my memory for a while of just think about life and think about situations, and putting yourself out there. And it's like, you know what? You don't know who you're going to meet. Now, if I had been aggressive with this person, "Hey, that's my book. Give it back to me."
Mm.
If I had handled the situation different, it could have been a far different story and a far different, experience,
Yeah.
basically. But
Yeah.
instead, it was kind of more of just, it was weird. It was like, is she coming back? Who's this
Yeah.
guy that's coming to pay for this book? Well, full circle, that's when it happened. And then I'm talking to the guy, super nice guy. Yeah, of course, he asked about the book and what are you doing? I told him what I was doing, and didn't buy a book. Didn't bother me in any way, shape, or form. But it was just those interactions, and it's interactions that you don't get with people if you don't go do book events, if you just don't put yourself out there. You don't. That's what I always tell people when they're asking questions about how do you market, how do you this. I was like, well, you don't know what's going to work. You can have
Never.
an idea, and you need to come up with a game plan for sure, but you need to be open to adjusting to things. You need to be willing to try new things, like you were mentioning, of having, instead of doing an event and having just, "Here's my book and I'm going to read it for you." Yeah, a dating game with monsters. From a marketing standpoint, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant, because you're setting yourself apart from the 50 other authors that have come through that bookstore and read their book and just done what everybody else does. So,
I think it's about always allowing for learning opportunities. You know
mhm,
what I mean? Like just being open to learning, and it's also about asking the right questions. And I think Chuck, somewhere along the line, asked himself the question of, how do I make this fun for people? How do
yeah,
I make it so fun for people that every time I come to town, they're going to want to come
they're
back
going to want to come
just for
back.
the
Yeah,
fun of it?
right.
And he figured out a way to do that. And I think other people will figure out a way to do that.
Yeah.
And so I just encourage people to try new things, and a lot of them are going to fail.
Yep.
But eventually you're gonna evolve into what it was meant to be. And
Yep.
so, but again, time,
Time.
runway,
Yep.
allow yourself those, allow yourself that Saturday that didn't work out.
Right.
Allow yourself that Tuesday night that you did a reading and three people came. Just
Hmm.
allow yourself. Every once in a while on Twitter, you see somebody post, I did a book signing and nobody came. And then
Hmm.
you see a flood of authors like Stephen King and all these famous people be like, my first book signing, two people showed up and one of them was lost. And so everybody has these moments.
Right.
And I think it's very human to feel like, well, no, but these people don't have, everybody has them. And so
Hmm.
you have to have a sense of humor and laugh about it, learn from it. How do I make something out of this? How do
Yep.
I find something of value in this, tough day? And you'd be surprised. Like sometimes you have a tough day and something happens that day. You didn't sell books, but whatever it is, you take that with you, and it just is a game changer in how you approach
Mm.
things.
Absolutely. So talk about Winding Road Stories and where you're going. You actually have signed on a friend of mine, Steve Stratton.
The great
So
streets there. Yes,
super
absolutely.
excited. He actually called me like 2 days ago. He was asking a question about Ingram Spark. He goes, "Hey, you'll probably know this answer." And I'm like, "Oh
Hmm.
yeah, I have learned so much about the online retailers and all the processes of creating these things over the last 2 years." And that's one of the cool things for me is someone helped me along the way. David Darling was an author that was super instrumental and forged his own path, and then kind of taught me things. And now I'm finding myself in a position where I'm following that same path and people are reaching out to me. And, there's no proprietary information here. If I can help
Hmm.
someone, if I can help them not stumble the way I've stumbled in the past,
Hmm.
then man, that's a blessing to be able to help someone's journey. So now to be able to have those interactions with Steve and kind of giving him advice on what I've learned with this retailer or that retailer or this process, is super, super encouraging and an amazing experience. So talk about what you got coming up and what's going on with your authors.
Yeah, we're at about 32 authors now.
Wow.
The thing I take most pride with Winding Road is that of the I think we've completed books and put out into the marketplace books with 25 authors. There's another seven or so that are in the works.
In the process. Okay.
Of those 25, I believe 20 of them have either done a second book or in the process of doing a second book. So I
Nice.
think that makes me very happy that people had a great experience. They
Hmm.
felt like I brought value to what they were doing in the editing process,
Hmm.
and in the marketing process, and they want to do it again.
Cool.
And that they're happy to be in the Winding Road family with the other authors. So
Hmm.
that part of it, brings me great happiness and is very rewarding. We continue to grow. We continue to develop books in a variety of genres. Steve's book is, what I would consider the first in that sort of military thriller
Hmm.
genre.
Yep.
A genre that I grew up reading. I mean, I grew up reading Tom Clancy
Tom Clancy.
books,
Yeah.
my older brother's Tom Clancy books. And
Yep.
so, I that to me, when I met Steve at BoucherCon, and
Hmm.
he told me I think he was publishing somewhere, and that publisher was no longer going to be uh, 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 publishing books.
Yep.
And so he was trying to figure out what to do. And I said, well, look, I think this is a very underappreciated genre of book. I mean, I know some of these books have a lot of readers, but I think people tend to think that they're a siloed group of readers,
Hmm.
and not as mainstream perhaps as it could be.
Hmm.
And I think there's potential there. And so, and Steve submitted something, and I was all in right away.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to find I, the I deal with a lot of writers. I have a lot of friends who are Southern writers who
Okay.
oftentimes lament that they feel New York editors don't really want their books because they take place in the South, and they
Okay.
feel like there's this divide.
Hmm.
and that they feel like there's a bit of a bias
Stigma
to
or
some of
something.
these
Yeah. Okay.
books. And my feeling is, um, well, I think those books are more important than ever
Hmm.
because if you do have this national divide,
Hmm.
whether it's politics or culturally, or what have you, that the only way to really get past that is to again sample this, enter a book about the South that you know nothing about, and try to gain a better understanding of what life is like there. And
Right.
fiction allows you to do that in a very non-threatening way. And
Hmm.
so I think that those books are really important. I think the same is true of military thrillers, that we a lot of people have very preconceived notions about what the military does.
Hmm.
They oftentimes can be portrayed in a very negative light, and they haven't really taken the time to get to understand the people who do this for a living.
Yeah.
And so when you do a thriller and you really understand that the things that somebody's faced with when they're serving, it brings a new level of empathy to what they do, and a new level of understanding. And so, in that sense, I feel like those books, again, are more important than ever. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of this is kind of how you approach it.
Right.
And I think in general, I like to think if people are reading, they are coming at things with an open mind. They want to learn.
Hmm.
And so you want to give them opportunities to learn. And in fact, this was a conversation I had very early on with Steve because Steve was like, I think somewhere along the way he had worked with an editor who, or maybe was going to work with an editor, um, and they had asked him to change some things in the book, um, because they felt that the reader would not connect with them.
Hmm.
And so, and Steve, who's got extensive experience in this world, um, wasn't sure what to do. So he asked
Yeah.
me, he said, do you want me to change these things to make them more reader friendly? I said, I want them to be real.
Hmm.
I want them to be authentic because that's what people are coming to you for, is they want to understand what this world is like,
Right.
not you don't want to show them their preconceived notion of what the world is like. You want to show them what it's really like.
What's really like, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, and not to mention the core group of readers who have served in the military that love these books, are going to be mad at you for changing it.
Yep.
Right? And so I was like, you're not going to win either way. I
Yeah.
said, but at least if it's authentic, it's real. And the men and women that have done this, that know better,
Hmm.
are like, that's great. And the people that don't, hopefully have a better understanding of what you
Have a
do.
better understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that like a lot of this is just taking a step back and being like, what are we really trying to achieve here? Like, what do
Hmm.
we want to happen?
Right.
Rather than kind of getting trapped up in what we think people want to happen.
Right.
Whether that's a publisher, whether that's an editor, whether that's a reader. Because the truth is, and if there's a theme for this conversation, in the words of the great William Goldman, nobody knows anything, right? Nobody knows.
Right.
A screenplay about two guys in the West and they end up in Bolivia. Nobody's going to watch that. Well, it's one of the great American movies, right?
Yep.
And so it's hubris to think that you're going to be able to do. Let me put it to you this way: if it were that easy, right? If it were that easy to say, if you do A and B and C, then it's going to sell 1 million copies.
Hmm.
Then we trust me, venture capital will hire people to just shoot that stuff out every day, and we won't be doing it anymore anyway.
Right. Yep.
So like if that worked, somebody would just be mining it to the ground.
Hmm.
They would just be fracking creatively, just stealing every resource they could to
Yeah.
make money from it. So you should embrace the fact that nobody knows anything. You should
Hmm.
embrace the fact that like maybe you do see something that people don't see, and that you
Yep.
have a story that maybe people don't think it's an unconventional,
Yeah.
that is going to be different, and it does break through. But you have to give it the runway and the time and have the irrational confidence that like, yeah, I believe
Hmm.
in this.
Well, and that brings to the point of not trying to write to the market. So if a if you're a writer right now and a vampire book becomes a big series, oh man, okay, that's gonna be hitting. No, but if you're just starting a vampire book, when that book's hitting, by the time you're gonna create your version of the Vampire Chronicle, it's gonna be old news. So you cannot try to write to the market, because you're gonna some people might hit it. You might get in time, or you might be writing something that's just about to hit and you didn't know that. But that's very rare for that to occur. You just need to stay in your lane, write what you're passionate about, write what you're good at writing, learn in the process for sure, tweak what you're doing. Um, but man, be true to yourself. You have to be true to yourself and that's the beauty of like what you're doing with having your publishing house and the ability authors have now is I think one of those extraordinary times about living right now is that I think you in a way you can be more true to yourself, because there's so few of people that are in the bigger machinery, where okay we need, and not this isn't a knock at Mitch Rapp, but I'll use the Mitch Rapp analogy of okay we need a Mitch Rapp book,
Hmm.
so you're gonna write this somewhat formulaic book on Mitch has these amazing adventures and experiences, and he's going to live at the end, and there's going to be a next one. And that's like, okay, that's a good formula. Keep writing those books the rest of your life. Um, you don't have to do that nowadays. Nowadays, you don't have to follow this one pattern. You can write, you can use your own creativity, and maybe your book will be the one that does find that big audience. But if you don't write that book, if you don't put that time in, if you don't learn the things you have to learn with sometimes multiple books, you never know what you're going to miss out on.
Yeah, you have to, at the very minimum, you have to believe in the value of what you've created.
Yeah.
And that could be hard at times. Like if you're out and you're querying agents and, you'll hear a lot of times like, hey, listen, you can write. I just don't know how to sell this,
Right.
right? You hear that a lot. And rather than being angry about it, the way you have to look at it is great. I'm glad I didn't sign with you.
Hmm.
Right? Because if you don't know how to sell it, you're the
Right.
wrong guy or
Yep.
girl or woman or and so I think that you just have to have a confidence and a belief in what you have created has value and that you're not looking at these folks so much as gatekeepers, but you're looking at them as partners and
Hmm.
collaborators. And this is a person that's going to help me realize the vision of what. And if you get the sense that they're not, then that's just not the right place for you.
Not the
And
place
that's
for you.
okay. You know what I mean? That's okay. Like that's
Right.
that's part of the process. Again, time, runway. Give yourself
Yeah.
time to find the right place for it, to find the right home for it. So I'll give you an example. Somewhere in this world, someone must have posted that we were open to queries 2 days ago because I got 200 manuscripts in my inbox in about 12 hours, right?
Wow.
The ferocity and the violence at which these manuscripts came in was astounding. Now, that being said, how, as a publisher, how much am I valuing these things when these things all got submitted at the same time, clearly responding to something that somebody
Something. Yeah.
posted, and
Right.
they were just like, I have this, I'm going to scratch that lottery ticket and send it in, right?
Yes.
Not doing any research on who we are, what we publish, how we work, what it
Hmm.
was just sort of like, take my book, I don't care, I want to be published, right? And so probably not the right fit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like people are just hoping that somebody's going to do it. And
Yeah.
it's like you have to change that equation. You want the right person to do it.
Right.
But you also, and the flip side of this, as the publisher, I could say this to read a lot of manuscripts. If you're getting similar feedback from a lot of people, um, at least keep an open mind about it,
Right.
right? And
Absolutely.
so I
Yeah.
had one manuscript that came in and I read it and I told the guy, I said, look, I think you have some ability. I said, but here are the things I think that are flawed with with the story. And I kind of went down the list.
Hmm.
I like to give people some feedback. It's like, look, if you take the time to send it in, I'm going to try and take the time to give you feedback.
Sure.
And the response to the guy said, thank you for reading it. I really appreciate it. I've heard those comments from a lot of agents
Hmm.
and publishers, but why not take a chance on me? I've won an
Hmm.
award and this. And I was like, well, if you've heard this feedback from all these
Yeah.
people, maybe like take a closer look at it. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like maybe there is something there,
There's safety
right?
in numbers sometimes when it comes to the consistent things people are pointing out for sure.
Yeah, I can understand if somebody told you something and you're like, that's way off base. I don't think that's at all. Like, I get it. But if you
Yeah.
just continually getting the same message, maybe that message, there's something to that message. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes that's where irrational confidence can get you into trouble because you're just
Right.
full steam ahead on something that's flawed in a way that the majority of people reading it feel that it's flawed,
Yep.
you know?
I
So,
had two agents. One of them a very well, like, has a lot of big clients. I had two agents get back to me in a short period of time on the Body Man. So this was probably, I don't know, 1999. No, 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 2019, 2020. Yeah, somewhere in that time period. But what was interesting about it was there was the complete. So the one agent basically said, solid story. I like where you're going with it, but the dialogue from the characters is just not, it's not authentic. It's not believable. I'm not getting it. And I was just, and I was kind of like, wow, because the most positive feedback I've got from people up to that point
Mm.
was how much they really connected with the dialogue and how they thought it was believable characters. Man, I could see these people having these conversations, and it just felt real. So it was kind of like a sucker punch in a way of like, man, am I missing something? Well, then the very next rejection I got within a week or two was another, like, not as big of an agent, but a well-known and respected agent that said, dialogue spot on. Having trouble following. I don't really think that the story is something that's up my that I'm looking to put, basically, and try to sell to an editor and to a big house. So you had two agents, well known in their field, complete opposite, and that's where, you know what you said. If you're getting consistent, if everyone that's coming back from an agent, every agent's rejecting you because they say, man, the dialogue's just not believable or it's not spot on, well, there's probably something to that. But if you get 10 agents to respond and six of them have kind of varying different comments on it, okay, well, those comments more personal preference, probably not necessarily there's a flaw in your manuscript necessarily.
Yeah, there could be a variety of reasons. Like,
Yeah.
I think when we enter into this, and a lot of this, again, like, I don't fault authors for feeling this way. Like, it's human nature, but like, you don't know how, not everybody's operating from an equal level of qualification on
Right.
doing this. Not everybody has the same skill level. Not everybody has the same interests. Some of those people are having really bad days. And
Yep.
I'm sure they're nixing a lot of things that day because they're just in a foul mood.
Right.
And like that has a lot of these things have nothing to do with you as an author,
Yeah.
right? And so it's up to you to determine which feedback you feel is valuable and that you accept and which
Mm.
feedback it isn't. And you just have to keep an open mind to it. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that you have to accept it all,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
so I think that's the problem is that people don't, it's it can be a challenging thing emotionally.
Hmm.
um you want that to be done. You want the person to say it's brilliant. You want
Right.
the platitudes for it, and it doesn't always come back the way you
Mm.
hoped. And so that's something that you just unfortunately have to get used to. But again, if you kind of have the mindset of, well, what is this person actually telling me? Are they telling me that I have the ability and that the product just isn't quite there yet? I've made the meal, but I only cooked it 80%,
Hmm.
right? So I can put it back in the oven and get another 20%, and I'll be there. And so I think you just have to kind of have an open, and it can be difficult. I was at a conference with one of my writers. This woman came up. Um, I think she might have been a bit on the spectrum, and so she was very blunt in how she spoke to us.
Hmm.
Um, and she asked the author, "What is your book about?" And my author said, "Well," and she kind of went in this very circular description of the story.
Hmm.
And the woman said, "Can I give you advice?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Your pitch is terrible." Right? Now, a lot blunter than most people uh,
Right.
would deliver that information. But when she bought the book and when she walked away, I said, "Okay, I know that was an unusual experience, but listen to what she said,"
Learn
right?
something from it. Right.
she we really did it did take a while for us to get to what the book was about. So maybe we need to work as we're doing this on something that's a very pithy two sentences that says exactly what the book is about.
Yeah.
And that, as you're doing these conferences, that's an experience that we like. It was a really like we like, whoa, and
In
lady.
your face. Yeah.
Yeah, but like she was right. She
Yeah.
just didn't communicate it, but you had to have an open mind rather than like shrugging it off and being like, that was horrible. It
Right.
was more like she did us a favor. And
Yeah.
so you have to kind of have a relentless positivity to this and
Mhm.
a relentless optimism that like, okay, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, but that was a learning experience and we figured
Right.
that out. And so, and believe me, in the 3 years that we've been doing this, we've had a lot of learning experiences. And so, but
And
I
you'll
like,
continue to have them. So,
and of course, but I like to think that we have fun doing them, and I
right.
like to think that we evolve from it
Hmm.
and that we become better at it, and hopefully, uh, uh, it's good that we're having them because it helps us to keep getting better at it.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and again, we're getting to do stuff that we love to do now. And from like we talked about earlier in the podcast, for most authors, it's very difficult for this to be their full-time job to be able to, pay bills with. But even to just have that creative outlet to be able to do something you enjoy, um, a lot of people go through life and don't have that. A lot of people just they don't have that thing that's kind of driving them. They're just surviving, they're existing, and
Mhm.
it's a sad place to be, I think, but it's a scary premise in your life to think that you're gonna kind of just maintain. I think we're built as creatures, as human beings. I think we're built to always be learning new things and always to be striving to do something different down the line, especially as you get better on something. If you get better and you're starting to get to a point where you're mastering something, well, then it's probably a good time to then start doing something different. Maybe keep doing that same thing. So, and I think writing is one of those things that I don't know that even the probably the most prolific writers out there probably if you talk to them or had the ability to talk to them, if they passed already, they probably would have said, I never got there. I wasn't there. I still was. This is such a difficult craft, and such a craft that you learn so much about that there's always a different way to say things. So especially with words being the foundation of what we do, there's always ways to trim the fat. There's always ways to explain things in a different way. So
Yeah, and I think two things. One, it's very difficult for us as authors. Like we are our business, right? And so sometimes it's difficult to separate our personality from the business.
right.
And so a lot of times authors will wear their hearts on their sleeves. You see it a lot of time online. You probably see it all the time. Like, well, another rejection,
Mm,
another 30-second rejection, but I'm going to keep going. And it's like, and I understand it's difficult to deal with.
hmm.
But you are your business. And so if you were trying to sell your house and somebody was looking to buy your house, the first thing you wouldn't say to them would be 32 people have looked at this, didn't want it, but go
Right.
take a look around. You know what I mean? And so sometimes we
Don't pull
forget
up the carpet and look at that floor under there. I tell you what.
like you're constantly being measured by how
Right.
you project and so sometimes it can be very cathartic to go and yell into the void about how bad things are going, but that's not going to help you get to where you want to go.
Right. Yeah.
um and then secondly, once you get to where you want to go, it's never enough.
Yeah.
There's always another level to this. Like
Mhm.
you sell 10,000 copies, you want to sell 50,000. You sell 50,000, you want to sell 1 million. You sell 1 million, you want a movie made. You want a movie made, you want a Pulitzer, you want to, I guarantee you there are authors out there being like, you know what, winning a Nobel Prize would be amazing.
Yeah.
And they've achieved everything. So there's
Right.
always another door. There's always a VIP
Mhm.
room that you're not in,
Yep.
right? And so I think you just have to kind of not want so much. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I think you just have to kind of build rather and I understand you're striving, you want to achieve and all that, but if your happiness is dependent on getting into that VIP room,
Hmm.
most people are going to be disappointed because
Yeah.
most people don't get in,
Yep. Well,
and so
yeah. I've had this conversation with people before. So November of 2021 is when I had my first book out, got to hold my first book for the first time. It took 2 years before I had that experience again where I held another book.
Mhm.
Um, it was a great experience. Was it as amazing as the first experience? No. Not and now I've had a third in my hand, and I'm gonna have a fourth in my hand here by the end of this year. Um, I already know. My brain is already like kind of convinced the rest of my body of like, hey, guess what? It's still not going to be as good as that first one. And that's
Yeah.
okay because that's fine. So what's my next thing that I'm getting excited about? And the next thing is always getting the next book out, yes. But I can't just have that anticipation be that book to be, oh, I've achieved what I've done. I've gotten there. I'm never going to be as happy again as this moment. Those thoughts have to be out of your head. So it's just like you be grateful for that book to be out and keep striving to do whatever it is next, the next book, the
Yeah.
next trip, the next whatever. But find ways to find joy in it though, because if you're thinking that book holding it in your hand is going to give you joy for the rest of your life, you're going to be disappointed in a couple days. And I think for me, for the first book, it was about a month. It's back behind me on the shelf. The first copy that I actually bought it myself, had it
Hmm.
delivered from Amazon myself because I didn't get my author copies for like 10 weeks or something from the publisher. So that first book I bought my own money and I held it in my hand. And every time I'd hold it, I'd get teary eyed. I'd get like,
Wow.
man, but after a while, I'd hold it and I'd be like, okay, good. I accomplished this. I set out and I worked really hard. What's next? What's next?
Yeah, and I somebody had written a book about this. It was about how people derive their feelings about their job based on like the highest moment and the lowest moment, right?
Mhm.
And the highest moment obviously is when the book comes out. The premise is that you sort of forget all those moments that you enjoyed with your coworkers, or like the kind of the ups and downs of it.
Mhm.
Like your memories are kind of honed in on the sort of the very high and the very low.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of books. So I think what's important, what I encourage our authors to do, is to find other ways to find joy from the process. Write
Hmm.
a short story. If
Yeah.
all of your emotions are tied into your book, right, then when things aren't going well, you're not going to feel well.
Right.
And when things are going great, you're going to feel great. But there's going to be those downturns, so do more public readings. Like if you want that
Mhm.
interaction with people, if you want that instantaneous gratification of performing your work, go sign up and do a reading and read in front of everybody, or read something new in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of different ways to do this where it doesn't just have to be you alone in a room.
Right.
And I think if you can find new ways to experience writing, you'll find greater joy from it, and you won't have all those eggs sitting in that basket
Mhm.
waiting to get smashed,
Yep.
you know? And so I think that like that's um like looking about writing in general and kind of what I would call a literary lifestyle, um, could be, and going to readings and participating in other people's things and
Hmm.
being grateful for other people's work, I think is an important part of that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
supporting other people, and those people support you, and then you're not starting from zero. You're starting from, I have 20 people that are really going to come out to my reading, and all of this is kind of little things that add up.
Yep.
And unfortunately, people, I think, kind of try to shoot the moon on one thing, and if it doesn't work, it's like it's manic depression when it
Yeah.
doesn't work out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, like you were mentioning, how people on average, spend about 2 weeks. Like, well, really? You can't expect something to take off in 2 weeks. Now, maybe for some people it will, but as a general rule, it's a daily effort to keep finding different ways to market, different ways to get your voice out there. If it's not marketing, it's just on social media or podcasts or fill in the blank. So, but yeah, it's something that you just constantly have to be putting an effort into. So,
You have to find a way to especially with marketing. With This is true with writing, but with marketing too. You have to find a way to make it sustainable,
mhm,
right? And that means different things to different people.
right.
you know, Whether for some people that's like on the weekend I throw myself into it for 8 hours and then I forget about it, and then I come back next weekend, and
Into right.
everybody knows people like that. They don't run all week and then they run 10 miles on Saturday,
Hmm.
right? I'm more of a mile and a half a day guy. I'd
Right.
rather do it every day.
Yep.
So I think if you find ways to do things that fit into your lifestyle, that aren't intruding on your parenting and your other stuff,
Hmm.
you will find much greater joy from doing this. There
Yeah.
was a woman at BouchCon. She said, I did 75 podcasts about my book last year. Every time, oh, that's great. That's amazing. Yeah, I reached out to 750.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, I was like, well, yeah. But she didn't do that all in one day. She did,
Right.
you know, 10 here, 10 there.
Hmm.
She did some research and she just kept reaching out to a few people every day. And over time, she got to 75 yeses, right?
Yep.
But that's also, close to 700 people that either said no or didn't respond to her at all or whatever. She didn't take it personally. She just
Yep.
kept going and she got a great result out of it. So
Yep.
again, it's like a lot of this stuff is mindset. A lot of this stuff is kind of how you frame it in your head and what your definition of succeeding is on a daily basis.
Right.
And I think that that changes from day to day.
Sure.
But I do think that like you can make this fun and collaborative with other writers and be part of it. And that's why I'm very grateful the words authors do this with each other. But
Hmm.
I think you can make it something that is enjoyable rather than dreadful.
Yeah.
Um, because it can get dreadful very quickly.
Sure.
If you feel like it's not going exactly the way you hope it will.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially if you then look the one of the worst things to do in any kind of field, I'm sure, but especially we'll talk in the publishing world, is always looking to the ones that have achieved the most and thinking to yourself, I have to be at that level or I've failed. You're almost guarantee you're going to fail if that's where you're starting with your thought process, is looking to the one that made it and think I have to achieve that to then be considered a success. Not the case.
But I don't know another industry where people feel that way. I wouldn't walk into Yankee Stadium and be like, the first guy that pitches to me, I'm hitting a home run.
Right.
Like I'm going to do what all these guys have been spending their entire lives doing. I've never done it before, but I'm going to do it the way they like. You
Yeah.
wouldn't do, but for some reason, when it comes to books, and again, maybe you're attracted to the outlier. Maybe you heard a story about this person. It was their first book, but
Yeah.
the overwhelming majority of people, this takes a lot of time and
Yeah.
energy and effort, and you have to love it. If you're that unhappy, why are you doing it? You know what
Yes.
I mean? That's how I feel. When I see people complaining all the time, I was like, why are you unhappy?
Yep.
You know? It's the same thing I say to Mets fans. I'm like, you chose that
You,
unhappiness.
you
You
chose to be
chose
Mets
that,
fans.
right? So, but it's like, like if you're
Right.
that unhappy, don't do it. But
Yeah.
so try to find ways to enjoy it. And I think you see that when you go to a conference and everybody's there and you're just happy to be with each other and you feel
Right.
like that's part of your tribe and all that stuff. You can see that exuberance. And then there's like this massive letdown when you go home
Yeah.
because you're like, why isn't it like that all the time?
Right.
And I ask myself that all the time. And I've been trying to figure out how to recreate that joy, portably,
Right.
with having authors get together in New York. We've tried to do reading series and stuff like that. It never
Yep.
quite reaches that question. And then I finally got to the point where I'm like, well, why am I trying to create something that I can't? Like, I
Yes.
like, why don't I try to find ways to find the joy
Yep.
instead of trying to recreate something that requires the participation of all these other people? Like, I
Yeah.
need to find it more internally. And
Right.
so, we've experimented with stuff that's gone very well here in New York and hopefully more. And so you just try to find different ways to do things and
Hmm.
and not get trapped in that idea of yes, that person did that and I want that.
Yep.
Right. You don't know what the circumstances. I would even dare to say, like, if you look at the people who have sold enormous numbers of books that have achieved just phenomenal success in this world, Stephen King, you know, the people that you see at airports, Colleen Hoover, whatever. I think they probably could not tell you why it was them.
Right.
I think they do check all the boxes of somebody who could be them,
Hmm.
right? They are prolific. They work extremely hard.
Right.
They write all the time. They are very connected to their readers and what they believe their readers would like to read.
Hmm.
They follow their own pursuits and their own storylines. So they could create original work. Like I think they check off every box that you need to check off to have that level of success.
Right.
Now, the question is, are there other people in the world who do that? Of course there
There
are.
is. Yeah.
So why did they have that lightning in the bottle? Maybe it was timing. Maybe they were in the right genre at the right time. Maybe
Yep.
somebody from a marketing standpoint helped them unlock something at the right time. There's an alchemy to it. Again, if
Hmm.
everybody knew how to do it, they would just like venture capitalists would come in tomorrow and
Yeah.
find a really good looking version, a much better looking version of me to do it. And so like that's how embrace the fact that we don't know
Yeah.
Embrace the fact that it could happen to anybody. And just
Mhm.
but you also have to try to find the joy in the process.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that's the step that people skip, unfortunately.
So I was fortunate. My first editor that I hired, which was probably back in 2018 or 19, I can't remember now. I think it was 18, 2018, hired an editor. And their first question to me was, if I tell you that this is no good and it can't be published, um, would you write another book? And I didn't even have to like finish reading the question. I think it was an email. Didn't have to finish reading the question and I replied, yeah, I'm going to write until probably the day I die or the day I don't have any more stories. So
Mhm.
if these stories don't get published, because ultimately I'm writing for myself. I'm writing stories that I've crafted, things that entertain and I find joy from, and I'm my first reader. So when I finish that draft and I laugh in certain spots and I get done and I type the word the end and I have a big smile on my face, I've just done the biggest mission impossible right there, and I've
Yeah.
been successful with it. That's why I did it. Everything else after that's gravy, and you better believe I have some pretty strong and high aspirations for what's going to happen after that. But that's not what drives me. I don't have a drive factor that says, man, I have to be a number one New York Times bestselling author or I failed. I have to have a book deal. The Body Man has to be turned into a series with Tom Cruise starring it, or I'm a failure. No, because if I'm setting myself up with those aspirations and those goals, it's good to have goals, but if those are what's going to give me joy and give me success, because even if I achieve them, it's just like with holding that book for the first time. I'm not going to be like, I've
Yeah.
arrived. I can die happy now. No, after about a week or a month or whatever, or after I've gone to a fancy dinner every night and had caviar and filet and lobster tail, guess what? I'm going to get sick of having it. So that can't be what my joy is from. That cannot be what keeps me going because ultimately I'm going to be unhappy.
Yeah. The joy has to come from making the best book that you possibly can make.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the centerpiece of
That
it.
is the
Without
centerpiece.
that, there really isn't anything else there, you know.
So let's get to our last question.
All right.
As a creator, as a writer, someone been doing this for a long time, I think you'd agree with me that life is like a book. You're going to have a first page, you're going to have a last page, and fortunately, you're not going to know how many pages are in the middle. None of us know. But as a writer, you get to write that last page. So for Michael Dolan, what would you want that last page to say?
Hmm. What's my word count, editor?
The
Um,
beauty of
I
that is it's whatever you decide.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you know, I'd like to think I made a difference in people's lives. I like to
Mhm,
think that I treated them lovingly and fairly. I'd like to think that whatever I left the world a better place than when I came into it.
mhm.
I'd like to think that some of those values that were passed to me live on in my son. And I just hope that everybody that has interacted with me has a positive experience from it and feels better for it. I think that's all you can really ask for in life. I don't think you can ask for more than that. So
There we
if
go.
I got to that, uh, I've been very blessed. I never thought that I'd be able to do this for a living. I do it for a
Mhm.
living. I work with amazing people. I've made enough friends to last 3 lifetimes. I've met some of the most amazing people in the world through what I've done as a writer and as an editor. So like, I could write that page today and I'd be
Mm,
fine.
be fine
So
with it.
I think that you know, it's people, not things. And
Hmm.
if you had a good impact with people and people look back at you and smile,
Yep,
then I feel like you've lived a worthwhile life in this earth.
I agree. Those things we collect and those things that we fill a house with, they don't go with us.
Mm-mm.
And they stay. They stay behind, and eventually they're gonna get sold. They're gonna get thrown in the trash. They're gonna be passed on and eventually break and whatever. And yeah, but those memories and those positive interactions we've had with people, that's what people will remember, and that's what will stay and live on after us. So I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
So how do people find Winding Road Stories and your authors and what's coming up next?
Sure. We're in all your favorite social media places where you like to avoid writing. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. Windingroadstories.com is the website. My personal Twitter is Mike Dolan NY. The reason why it's such an awkward handle is there's a lot of Mike Dolans in the world, and so it's very difficult when
Set
these
yourself
channels
apart.
start to claim one. So you kind of have to find something that I was joking with authors at a conference because a lot more people are using their initials,
Hmm.
you know. And I was like, there's going to come a day where everybody's using the initials on their books just to get the handles and the URLs. You know, it's like I'm just going to be M.A. Dolan because they're just like that's the only thing I can get.
The only thing you could get.
It's the only URL I can claim. That's mine. So, but that's where we
M.A.
are.
Dolan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah,
6.
exactly. So we'll be if you're in New York in the end of September, September 29th, we'll be at Brooklyn Book Festival. A lot of authors are coming in around the country for that, which I'm very
Okay.
excited about. But we're online, our authors are online. They're lovely people, you know, feel free to check out their work. They're very responsive to their readers and to people who want to talk writing and things of that nature. And we're
Awesome.
grateful for the opportunity to do this, and I'm grateful to you, Eric, for having me on. I really
Well,
appreciate it.
thanks for coming on. Sorry for the technical snafu, but we'll make it look
Mhm.
all sexy and pretty in
Yeah.
post-production. And I hope one of these days I'll end up in New York City and we can break some bread.
Yeah, if you can use the sexy pretty filter for me, I would love that. But yeah,
I
anytime.
got it on right now, baby. Look, I mean, look at that. Woo, wow.
And the other authors out there, if you're, you know, if you're floating through New York, look me up. And I love meeting our other authors, our fellow
Yeah,
authors, and showing them
a
what a
great
great city this
community.
is. Yeah,
Thank you, Michael.
appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
Thanks, Eric.